back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including one, how Steve Bannon is going off on some of the billionaires that donated to Donald Trump during his campaign, and what the impact may be moving forward, and an article talking about how Arizona is actually going to reform their voter system and make it more like Florida. And of course, we're going to end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. But that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump into our daily debate. So, are the billionaires going to have more influence in Donald Trump's term than last time? Because, they obviously had their say last time. He had cozy billionaires, or at least a few that he had some relationships with, but last time, at least in 2016, he did not have as many donating to him. In 2020, his campaign was not fully self-funded. Then again, 2016 wasn't fully self-funded, but the point being, there's definitely been an uptick in the amount of high-dollar donors that are getting behind him. And Steve Bannon has some pretty specific ideas about what's going to go on there, but I want to hear yours. So throw them down in the comment section, and then we're going to jump into the article once you put it down there so I can read what everybody's thinking. So from there, let's jump into the article that comes from Raw Story. Headline reads, "Shove It. Steve Bannon unleashes profane attack on billionaires cutting checks for Trump." Now, for anyone who has not been paying attention and is not fully aware of what's going on behind the scenes, Donald Trump this time not only used his grassroots fundraising power in order to pay for a lot of his legal bills, but he also took on a lot of different billionaires and had them donate to his PAC and also directly to the campaign. Or you had situations like Elon Musk, where basically giving him a whole bunch of extra clout, a whole bunch of extra, not free advertising, because that would violate the Federal Election Commission rules, but at least more clout on things like X, formerly Twitter, though I do still call it Twitter. But the point being that there are more billionaires behind Donald Trump this time. And you could see that some of his takes have shifted to some degree. On TikTok being one of the most famous ones. I believe it's Jeffrey Zaz. He is a large donor in TikTok, and at one point, Donald Trump himself wanted TikTok to be banned in the United States, and now he had seemingly moderated his position after building a more friendly relationship with Jeffrey Zaz. Now, does that mean that the money came in and Donald Trump said, "Oh, no, I can't touch it anymore. Jeffrey doesn't like it. It's not a thing"? No, I don't think it's quite that quid pro quo, but they run in the same circles. By paying in order to be at some of these dinners, he gets the right, or at least the privilege, of getting Donald Trump's ear and being able to talk about some of these things. So even if they're not explicitly paying for policy, they are paying for access. And with that access, they can do a lot if they are effective massagers of Trump's egos or just effective lobbyists for their certain cause. Well, Steve Bannon this time is coming out, and he is not loving what he's seeing from behind the scenes donors that are coming out and supporting Trump now. Quote, "Far-right Donald Trump ally Steve Bannon laid into tech billionaires who are donating money to Trump's inaugural fund on his, quote, War Room podcast Friday, accusing them of being fair weather friends who are only trying to suck up to Trump because they aren't able to defeat him in the election." Now, do I think this is accurate? Maybe. The reason I say maybe, because Donald Trump is a man who has said, "I will be your retribution." Then again, he's also said that the retribution, the revenge, the payback will be me winning. And he is a man who does not like the fact that social media came after him last time. He doesn't like that Facebook took him off, doesn't like that Twitter took him off after 2020. So there's a sentiment, you could argue that there could be a sentiment within Donald Trump's camp that we really need to go after these tech guys. We really need to make sure that the government is monitoring them and making sure that they are not trying to limit free speech, that they are not trying to shut down a certain part of the conversation. So, in order to get on his good side, tech billionaires are coming in and saying, "Hey, Donald, my dude, what's going on? It's been a while since you've been over to Silicon Valley. Come on out to some of our mixers. Oh, you want us to come on to Mar-a-Lago? Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, hey, man. Hey, let's have some of that Chardonnay. Let's talk policy all night." And some of the talking points that he said throughout most of the campaign, especially about green cards for anybody who gets a college degree here, that is a talking point that people on the tech side of things have been arguing for a long time. Because if somebody comes here from India, if somebody comes here from Germany, if someone comes here from Namibia, it doesn't matter. They've been arguing if they're intelligent enough, they go through these high skill programs at colleges, they should basically have a green card. We want high skill labor in the job pool. So we want to ensure there's a pipeline to get them there. And that has been a talking point of people in Silicon Valley for quite some time, because they really can take a lot of this raw talent from some of the top schools. And if they don't have green cards, it can be a problem. It can be an arduous process, versus if there's a easy method to do it, they could basically set up scholarships and say, okay, we're going to help pay for your time here in the United States, going to university. We're going to make sure you get this grant. We're going to make sure you have the best professors. And also when you get done, there's a green card. That is a talking point that, while it doesn't directly, it's not something that the Silicon Bros came up and said, here you go. We're going to put this on the table. This is what our money costs. Once again, they have the access, and this is something they've been talking about for quite some time. And now you see Donald Trump parroting it. So there's no doubt that this cadre of tech billionaires most definitely put money into his campaign. Don't get me wrong, many of them also put money into Kamala's campaign in order to get their message across. But I think that when Bannon says that they're fair weather friends, I don't necessarily know if they're fair weather friends or they're pragmatists. And if they're pragmatists, I understand. It's the game we play. We don't want to have one guy in there who's going to be mad at us. We want to make sure that we have a seat at the table. So we're going to put money into what he's doing. But that also opens up a lot of issues, because Donald Trump basically promised that there are going to be tax cuts. He basically promised that the oil industry will thrive at one of his dinners early on in the campaign, when he said, if you give me money and I win, I'm going to make sure that your guys' taxes are lower. I'm going to make sure that some of these tight regulations are taken off the books. I'm going to make sure that oil and drilling and speculating are going to be possible in the United States again. And guess what? They backed him heavily. Now, are there not oil interests also donating to Kamala Harris? Not necessarily so much, but alternative tech ones, maybe. So, of course, they're going to just go with the candidate that's already going to do what they want. But when you become so brazen as to say, basically, I'm the man for you, make sure you give me your money in order to get me across the line there, that's not even saying, I will do this for you if you give me the money. It's, I'm doing this already, and I want to make sure that you know how valuable this is, so donate money to me. Now, is the tech bro situation exactly the same as that? No, because they are possibly fair weather friends. Maybe Steve's right on that one. But even if they're not actually friendly and they just want a seat at the table, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, whether they're actually friends or they're being pragmatists, which is the whole point I was trying to get to here, is the dichotomy of the two. It doesn't matter, because they have his ear. And Steve Bannon probably doesn't like that. Steve Bannon thinks that he has the ear of Trump, that he is the Trump whisperer, or at least to some degree he's been out there protecting him, trying to defend him all this time, and doesn't necessarily like that somebody else is coming in and providing ideas. Does that mean that he's wrong? No, he might be a little jealous, but he does have a good point. And this is money in politics. This is the corrosive nature of money in politics, because eventually when someone like Donald Trump comes around, and also, don't get me wrong, Obama took plenty of money from different PACs that had various interests, especially the teacher unions. They were giving a whole bunch of money to all different Democrats' campaigns. Same with Joe Biden. The unions were behind him the first time. George Bush, let's be clear. All these different interests have always been doing this. But it has never been so brazen as with a man like Donald Trump. And this opens up the door to a more obvious, front-facing, Machiavellian game. And it's always been Machiavellian behind closed doors, but in front of the camera, if you make people that jaded about politics, people are already very jaded about politics, but you can at least rely on some feeling, some semblance of civility being a nice veneer on the outside of politics. But if you strip away even that and you make it such a jaded power game, we are only going to get bad actors in the future, or at least the likelihood of it is going to increase. Maybe it's too much of a uh, absolute statement to say that we're only going to get them, but the likelihood will increase, and the people willing to exploit the jaded perspective of the people that are actually voting, that are the populace, that are actually influencing where we go as a nation, will most likely increase, because they understand that, oh, this population has already been disillusioned, so we might as well put it out there in the open. Then again, that is what Donald Trump is doing on a daily basis. That's what any candidate is doing on a daily basis. Vote for me because I'm going to lower your taxes. That's basically, it's not a quid pro quo directly to one person, but it basically is a quid pro quo to everybody. He's not cloaking it in anything, oh, we want to make sure the American family thrives. No, he's literally saying, I will make you more financially well off by lowering your taxes. I will make sure more money stays in your pocket. So politics has already been here for a while. Donald Trump just says the quiet part out loud. But let's hear what else Bannon has to say here, because there is a little bit more to it. Quote, Bannon's rant came at the tail end of something that was fascinating following the most recent election. Quote, the Democratic Party can go away. We can actually end it. We can drive a stake in the heart of the beast. You can do it. And why Republicans can do it, he argued, is, quote, populist policies, nationalist politics, economics to bring jobs back. This is where you see the flip. This is where you see the opposite side of the tech bros, because the tech bros want, and this is a sweeping generalization, so understand that I'm not trying to say every single tech bro wants this, but generally, we outlined how they want to have more foreign labor that's able to get green cards in order to come over here. That is not necessarily a nationalist policy. You see how they want lots of free trade in order to make sure that they can get the best products from other places and make sure all the inputs into their different, whether it be systems that they're building, cloud facilities, processing facilities, or products that they're making, they want to make sure that that is really cheap. So they're going to make sure that free trade is not just something that we care about within the United States, but making sure that it's strong outside the United States, and everything funneling in comes in at a lower price. That is not necessarily populist or nationalist economics. Populist policies, that could be an argument against the forces that be, and you could argue that tech bros, the Silicon Valley, they have a lot of influence. They are part of the elite, so to speak, that the populace, the people who feel as though they are fighting for the common man, and the common man who looks up at the tech bros as an idol, but also the people that are able to actually control how their lives go, which to some degree, you can't deny that if the elites are the people that set trends by culture alone, well, normally that's, oh, we have a fancy dinner, or we have fancy dresses, and these are the things that we care about, and we are wealthy enough to afford these things, and this sort of filters down through culture. Now, the actual elite can control culture simply by changing algorithms. They can change what goes viral. They can change what people care about. And as sad as it is to say, our generation and the generations above us are chronically online and allowing these different trends, these algorithms, to dictate what they see. And what you see is how you act a lot of the times. It doesn't have to be quite that simple. Just because you see a monkey on Instagram go, you're not going to go around, But over time, what is one thing that people are very obsessed with nowadays? Red pandas. You know why? Because red pandas have been pushed by the algorithm. Now, you could argue that that is a free market mechanism. People love red pandas, therefore they'll go viral. Fair enough. But there are other things, like at Google, where they limit the searches of certain conservative politics, of conservative politicians, of conservative articles, and then that perspective doesn't necessarily get out there as much, and that is the tech elite putting their scale on the thumb, which Bannon would argue, and let's be clear, I'm extrapolating from what he said. You would have to go ask him for his direct opinion. But based on what he said, it would appear to me, I think he could make a pretty strong argument that he would be against the elite that can shape culture in such a heavy-handed, but also in a cloak and dagger way. So this is the antithesis. This is the dichotomy that you're seeing between the two sides of Trumpism, the true MAGA versus the people who are getting on board because they think they can benefit from it. Then again, all politics has always been this, but it's interesting to see in an era where it's not just party politics basic small government stuff, but actually a vibrant populist movement that is rising up within the ranks of a political party. Like I said, fascinating stuff. I want to hear your opinions. I want you to throw them all down there in the comment section, so I can stay up to date on what other people are thinking. Because obviously I live in my own echo chamber. I listen to a lot of different things and I try to take in a lot of different information. But even then, when you do so, you still build a echo chamber for yourself in those spaces rather than possibly going out and getting different opinions. So that's the beautiful thing about this. Not only am I able to display my opinions, but I love being able to hear from you guys, because when you engage, I can actually hear. I've heard many stories. One gentleman talked about his military experience, and when I was trying to give the military a benefit of the doubt on certain things, he said, actually, no, it's not the case. These sort of corrections, or at least insights, provide a lot of context and can help shape how future content is made. Maybe you're a tech bro. I don't know why a tech bro would be listening to this, but maybe you're a tech bro and you have a counter argument, or you want to clarify something. You want to make sure that I'm not just saying the generalizations like I said earlier, but making sure that I have the understanding of why people think this way. Because maybe I know that they think this way, or at least in a large picture kind of way, I have an idea of what they think, but that doesn't necessarily mean I truly understand why they think that way and what benefit it will bring. Maybe I need a little bit more perspective, and maybe I'll disagree with you. That's always the beauty of throwing it down there in the comment section. So with that said, there is one more article that we're going to go to today before the Daily Delight, and this comes from Just the News. Arizona Republicans introduced Florida-style election reforms to speed results. So election time has passed at this point, and we know that Arizona went to Donald Trump. But Arizona took basically a day and a half, 2 days to really solidify things, even though it could be called for Donald Trump. But to get every single thing in, it took quite a bit of time. Florida was basically locked in, confirmed, within maybe 6 to 8 hours of the polls closing. So the question is, why can Florida be so efficient? Why can they get all of this done? But there's other states like Arizona that are not able to close all of these voting measures, all of these voting centers out, all of these vote tallies, and get them locked in. Well, now we have Arizona finally stepping up to the plate in order to actually be on the same plane, or at least one of the parties saying, we are going to make sure that this gets done right. So I'm going to read the first 2 paragraphs, and then we'll have a little bit more of a discussion. Quote, Arizona Senate President Warren Peterson is seeking election administration reforms similar to what exists in Florida in the upcoming legislative session in hopes of delivering faster results. Senate Bill 1011 or 1011 would end the drop-off of mail-in ballots at 7 p.m. on the Friday prior to the election day, which should be a major change from the drop-offs that are available until polls close on election day currently. So they're saying Friday before, that is when you can do the last drop ballot. Anytime up after that until the election day, you can't do it, which I think there's merit to that. If you're going to drop off your ballot because you're not going to be there, yeah, that seems pretty reasonable to me. If you're dropping off your ballot and you got it early and you just want to drop it off on the day of, well, I mean, why do you want to do that in the first place? Why wouldn't you drop it off ahead of time? Maybe you don't want to be in lines at the election place. Fair enough. I can understand that logic, but at that point, you could still put it in early. So that is a big question. Why is that something that they actually allow in the first place? Now, if we are to look past that and look at the question of, is this going to actually make sure that the most people get out there and vote? I think it's not going to change that much. If we're going to be real here, I don't think changing the date at which you can drop off the ballot, one, if somebody's going to drop off a ballot or have a absentee ballot or do these sort of thing, mail-in ballots ahead of time, they're probably going to mail it very early. You're not going to have the cross-section of people who are going to mail in the ballot the day before election versus be able to go to the polls, because like I said, these are probably more than likely absentee ballots or something to that effect. The number is very low. I don't think that's actually enough to justify this change, because I don't think that's actually going to have a large impact. Now, you could argue that we want to make sure that all the ballots get there, and that's what the concern is. But I don't think the number of people doing this are staggering enough to actually change the results and therefore justify holding up the entire process. And what I mean by that is, if it ran as it was and they're really worried about closing out early, I don't think this is that much of a big deal. That being said, because it's not that much of a big deal, then they should just move the deadline up, and people that don't get out there early don't do it. Fair enough. But what about some of the next things they talk about? Quote, "Today, me and my colleagues will introduce legislation to get election results night of. Arizona will no longer be the laughing stock of the nation and the last to announce electoral votes. The bill will incorporate the key differences between Arizona and Florida," Peterson tweeted Wednesday. In addition, the bill would require an early voting certificate to be signed by a voter as opposed to a mail affidavit envelope for those voting early in person. Now, this is very important. This is basically a safe measure in order to ensure that there's not cheating. Now, just by signing this, by having something that you have to sign, essentially, a voting certificate, does that initially mean just because you have it that you are 100% legitimate, that you are a citizen? No, it's just an extra little bit of paperwork. Then again, we'll have to see how it actually live out. If they have it so that you can only get the certificate if you verify your ID at the voting place and you're able to go through process X, Y, and Z, fair enough. But in theory, the way that it's just laid out here, I don't necessarily think it's enough to actually increase voter security. Once again, we're going to have to see it in place. Now, I want to read the last part, which is less about what the bill actually does, but more about the theory of how it will pan out. Quote, "If the bill, which will also have a House equivalent, passes the Republican majority legislature, it will land at Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs' desk." Quote, "Faster election results should not come at the expense of voter rights," Christian Stater, spokesman for Hobbs, told the Center Square in a statement. As the state's former chief elections officer, Governor Hobbs is open to proposals to speed up the counting process, but any solution must protect Arizonans' freedoms to make their choices heard at the ballot box. She remains committed to a voting process that maintains accessibility and integrity for all Arizona voters and guarantees safe and secure, fair elections. End quote. Well, thank you, Katie Hobbs. That is very kind of you. Yes, I'm happy that you want to protect the rights of the people that live within your state. Now, is this actually going to infringe upon voter rights that much? I don't know. Now, I think for maybe a small selection of military voters, you could see an argument there. I don't necessarily think that the people who just live in Arizona are going to feel oppressed, are going to feel trodden upon by having to possibly move up their mail-in day by 1, 2, maybe 3 days. Now, this bill incorporates a lot more than just that, counting measures, so on and so forth. What I think they should do is right now, there are about 5 major counties in Arizona. I believe it's actually 5 congressional districts in Arizona, if I'm not crazy, which means there are a few different apparatus there. What you should probably do is devote more money to actually being able to count, possibly make more precincts, voting precincts, in order to make sure that you can subdivide the work a little bit more and you can get more people on it. I think that's also a good measure. Now, is it easy? No. Arizona is not the most developed state in the world. There's still going to be a lot of people that have to drive in from far places, and that's why mail-in ballots can be good. But also, if those people are already dedicated enough to mail in their ballot, guess what? As I've said multiple times here, they can do it early. So, will this bill help? I think there's a 75 upside, 25 downside, but we can only really find out one way, which is put it into action. See if they can become Florida, or is Arizona just going to be perpetually the last state? But I expect more things like this to come out, especially as Republicans have made gains on the state level. And we saw a few different issues during the 2020 elections with mail-in ballots. Now that we've had an election with it, another election with the remnants of those laws and how they've been interpreted. I think we're going to see more of this, not necessarily anti-mail-in ballot, but more reformist mail-in ballot legislation coming out, and Arizona could be the first stomping ground for something like this. So, with that said, I think we've covered the serious topics enough. I think we should go to our daily delight. And obviously, I want everybody to leave with a smile. So today, I've brought you something a little bit special. We have bears making snow angels. This one, I will provide the link down in the description. It's a cute article about these guys more rolling around than actually doing the whole process of fanning their arms, but they're doing their best. They're making bear angels, or they're making snow polar bears. I don't know what you would call them. Maybe, we just call them snow angels, even though they look nothing like angels. But if you want to go see that one, I know it snowed recently where I was, so, it brings the holiday mood in as well. You can check out all the links to all of these articles in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle @YourDailyFlip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Oh, nope, I forgot one thing. If you want international news, and it's quick international news, it's 6 minutes or less, it's 6 stories from around the world. Come back here or the RSS feed on Tuesday and Thursday. You can listen to it while you're going into work or while you're coming home from school, whatever it may be. You can get it out of the way pretty quickly, and I would love to have you back here. It's called 6 and 6. So now let's try that again. With all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.